My fiancé left me at the altar with a note saying, I deserve better. 2 years later, he showed up at my work crying. But it wasn't for me. I was 28 when it happened. We had everything planned, the venue, the band. Even the cake flavors were taste tested 3 times. People flew in from out of state. My mom cried when she saw me in the dress. Everything felt perfect. I thought we were solid. His name was Ben. We met in college. He had a quiet charm, the kind of guy who never raised his voice but always made you feel like you were being heard. We dated for 4 years, lived together for 2, and got engaged on a snowy weekend in Vermont. I said yes before he even finished the question. The morning of the wedding, I woke up nervous, but excited. Bridesmaids buzzing around me, makeup brushes flying, mimosas half drunk on the table. But Ben was late. Not unusual, he was always a little behind schedule. I wasn't worried, until the wedding planner pulled me aside, her face pale. There's something you need to see, she said. She handed me an envelope. My name was written on it in Ben's handwriting. I remember the sound of my heartbeat in my ears as I read. I can't do this. I love you, but I deserve better. Maybe one day you'll understand. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, stunned, while guests started whispering, and my mom tried to hold it together for both of us. I left through the back entrance in my wedding dress, climbed into the back of a friend's car, and stared out the window as everything I thought I knew about love dissolved. That letter haunted me for months. I moved out of our apartment that same week. Ben was already gone, of course. He packed up his things while I was at my final dress fitting. Not even a confrontation. Just silence, boxes, and one gut punch of a note. I blocked him on everything. The next few months were a blur. I couch-surfed between friends' places, barely spoke to anyone unless I had to. Every time someone asked, what happened? I'd just say, he changed his mind. I couldn't bring myself to say the rest. But here's the thing about being humiliated that publicly. Eventually, you stop caring what people think. And when you stop caring, you start doing things for yourself. So I took the honeymoon tickets, non-refundable, and went to Italy alone. It was supposed to be Venice with Ben, but instead, it was Venice with a journal and a bottle of cheap wine from a corner store. I cried on the first night, then stopped crying somewhere around the 3rd plate of pasta in Rome. When I came home, I started over. New job. New apartment. I even legally changed my last name, just to make it feel like I wasn't that girl anymore. The one who got left behind like a scene in a sad movie. 2 years passed. And then he showed up. Not with a letter this time. With tears. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was working the front desk at an upscale architecture firm. A man walked in, soaked from the rain, head down, asking if he could speak to someone in HR. I didn't recognize him at first. Then he looked up. Ben. And in his arms was a toddler. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't move. I was staring at the man who shattered me, now holding a wide-eyed child, maybe 2 years old, with dark curls and a pacifier hanging from a clip on her jacket. He looked older, thinner, like life hadn't been kind to him. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I wondered if he was going to pretend we were strangers. But he whispered, Emma? I didn't answer. He stepped closer, adjusting the child on his hip. I didn't know where else to go. I need help. That's when it hit me. He wasn't crying for me. He wasn't here to say sorry, or explain, or beg for forgiveness. He was desperate. For himself. I stood up slowly. You shouldn't be here. His mouth opened, then closed again. He glanced around the lobby like he suddenly realized how insane this was. Please, he said. Can we just talk? 5 minutes. Talk about what, Ben? I kept my voice low. About how you humiliated me in front of 200 people. Or how you ghosted like a coward and said you deserved better? He flinched. The toddler squirmed. She was too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel the tension in the room. He looked down at her, then back at me. Her name is Clara. Her mom left. I'm not doing okay. And suddenly, I felt nothing. No rage, no sadness, not even pity, just emptiness. I stepped back. You made your choice. Now live with it. I buzzed security and walked away. Behind me, I heard him mutter. I didn't know what better even meant. Not until it was gone. But I didn't look back. I walked into the elevator and pressed the button without looking back. As the doors closed, my reflection stared back at me in the polished metal.
Calm, composed.
Someone I wouldn't have recognized 2 years ago. But inside, my chest was on fire. I got to my floor, sat at my desk, and tried to work.
Couldn't.
My hands trembled too much. Not because I still loved him, but because I realized something even heavier. He thought I'd still care. He thought he could walk back into my life, like I'd been waiting. Like I'd stayed frozen in that moment in my wedding dress, broken, hoping he'd return with a better explanation. And the saddest part? Once upon a time, I would have. That night, I poured a glass of wine and reread an old email draft I'd written to him the day after the wedding. I never sent it. It said things like, "I forgive you," and "I'll be here if you change your mind." I hit delete. Then I pulled out my journal and wrote a new entry. Today, Ben came back, and I let him walk away. The next morning, my manager called me in early. Apparently, Ben had come back to the building after hours, trying to wait outside for me. Security told him to leave, but now legal was involved. I assured them I didn't feel threatened, just tired. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Because a man who disappears without warning and returns with a child, tears, and no plan doesn't just vanish again without leaving another mess behind. And I had a feeling this one wasn't going to be mine to clean up. The fallout started quietly. A few days later, I got a message request on Instagram. The profile photo was a blurry picture of a woman holding a baby. The username didn't ring any bells, but the message stopped me cold.
Emma.
I think we need to talk. It's about Ben and Clara. I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to delete it, pretend I never saw it. But curiosity, or maybe closure, pulled me in. I clicked on her profile. Not much there, a few photos, most of them old. Nothing recent. Nothing that screamed, mother of Ben's child. But something felt off. After an hour of internal debate, I replied, "Who are you?" The response came fast. "I'm Clara's real mom." My stomach dropped. I asked for proof. She sent photos. Ones of her pregnant, ones of Clara as a newborn. She even sent a voice memo with Clara babbling in the background, saying, "Mama." The voice on the recording wasn't mine. And it sure as hell wasn't Ben's. "He told me you were his sister," she wrote. "I saw your photo once, on his phone. He said you were helping raise her. But something didn't sit right. Then he disappeared 2 months ago. Took Clara. I only found out where he was after I tracked his work email to your company site." I stared at the screen, frozen. So not only had Ben abandoned me at the altar, he'd lied to another woman, taken her daughter, and used me as part of his twisted cover story. I felt sick. And suddenly, that desperate look on his face when he showed up at my office made more sense. He hadn't come for help. He'd come to hide. I took a deep breath, then typed back, "You need to call the police."
Now.
She replied almost instantly. "I already did."
Twice.
They said it's complicated, that because Ben is listed on the birth certificate and there's no custody agreement, it's not technically kidnapping. My heart sank. I asked if she wanted to meet in person.
She did.
We met at a small cafe across town, both of us cautious, tense. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from months of fear, not sleep deprivation. She introduced herself as Haley, Clara's real mom. She laid it all out. She and Ben had dated for about a year after he left me. She hadn't known about the wedding. He told her his last relationship ended because she wanted too much. When she got pregnant, he'd seemed excited, supportive. But things changed after Clara was born. He became controlling,
Distant.
jealous of her friends, her family. Then, 2 months ago, he told her he was taking Clara to visit his cousin and never came back. She went to his place, but it was empty.
Cleaned out.
No sign of them. She was terrified. He had taken her daughter and disappeared, until he showed up at my work. I sat there, stunned, as she pulled out her phone and showed me text messages, voicemails, photos. Everything pointed to the same truth. Ben hadn't come to cry or reconnect. He was on the run. And I was just the convenient, forgotten past he thought he could hide behind. But he'd made a mistake, because he assumed I'd still be weak. I left the cafe with Haley and made one call. Not to Ben, not to the police, but to a friend of mine named Olivia, who worked in child welfare investigations. She'd once told me, over drinks, that the fastest way to trigger a legal response in a gray custody situation was through the back door. Welfare checks, protective service reports, and paper trails that couldn't be ignored. I told her everything. The next morning, Olivia filed a report anonymously, stating concerns for a missing child and potential custodial interference. Haley backed it up with her own report, and within 24 hours, a caseworker showed up at Ben's temporary address. How did we get the address? He was dumb enough to list me as an emergency contact on Clara's daycare forms. I didn't even know he was putting her in daycare, but there it was, sitting in a system that still had my old phone number tied to him. One of the admins called me, assuming I was a sister, saying he needed help updating some info. I played along, asked for clarity, and walked away with everything I needed. When child services arrived, Ben tried to talk his way out of it, but he didn't have legal custody. No court orders. No documentation giving him the right to keep Clara from Haley. And when they asked where the mother was, he lied. That's when Olivia stepped in and handed them Haley's signed affidavit. Photos, messages, everything. It wasn't even a debate. Clara was taken into protective care that same evening and reunited with Haley 2 days later after a judge-approved emergency placement.
Ben.
He was charged with custodial interference and false statements during a state investigation. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines. Didn't show up in court. Didn't reach out. Didn't even watch the news coverage. I just sat on my balcony that night, wine glass in hand, phone buzzing with messages I ignored, and smiled. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because he thought I'd be his shield. And instead, I was the match that burned the whole lie down. A week after the court hearing, Haley sent me a photo. It was Clara, back in her mother's arms, smiling with a lollipop in one hand and a stuffed bunny in the other. The caption read, "She's safe. Thank you, Emma. I owe you everything." I stared at that photo for a long time. Not because I wanted recognition, but because it finally hit me. I wasn't the woman Ben left at the altar anymore. I wasn't someone waiting for closure, or healing, or a second chance to say everything I never got to say. I had become something else. Someone who didn't need to be chosen to have value. Someone who didn't crumble when faced with the past. Someone who held the door open for justice and let the truth walk through. I printed that photo and tucked it into my journal behind that old draft of my unsent wedding letter. Not to remember the pain, but to remind myself what it turned into. Because sometimes we don't get apologies. Sometimes we don't get explanations. But if we stand tall, move forward, and refuse to become the worst thing that's happened to us, we win anyway.